destroying my cello before I even get things started. Well, home studios. Home studios. You weren't supposed to see that I'm wearing shorts, but you did. That's the opening of Quarenghi's Fugue right there. So if you've been following me and watching some of the videos that I put out in the last month or so, and of course, if you've been listening to my podcast episodes, the last 3 in particular, then you know that I have this desire to look into counterpoint a little bit deeper. And it's really all because when I was reading The Violoncello's History by Joseph Vasilevsky in the 19th century section, Italy, I came across a name that I randomly picked as really no other reason than random. Quarenghi, cellist, pedagogue, and historian of the cello, was and composer, was mentioned, and he had a very short biographical sketch, and he wrote this massive cello method that I discovered. Thank you to whoever uploaded it to IMSLP, because it really is interesting, very eye-opening too. He wrote this massive cello method, and in one of the sections, he writes all about counterpoint, and he even composes his own 5 species of counterpoint: imitation, canon, and fugue. Now, I'm looking at the fugue. Subject, answer. That's what I just played. The subject comes in alone, and then the answer comes in sometimes alone, and the subject just leaves off to let the answer come in and state itself in the dominant. Got the dominant, tonic, and then dominant. But in this case, he actually writes a counter subject, which is a little bit hard to play on cello, but very interesting. Now, why did I choose this? I want to say a few things about it to see if anyone would engage. Maybe you feel the same way. Maybe you had a better, more thorough upbringing in terms of playing Bach than I did. Or maybe you know nothing at all, which is also interesting and you want to get to know more. I'm not throwing my teachers under a bus here because I don't think it's not part of their prerogative. I mean, any of the teachers for the last 100 years, it's not something that they felt like they had to do or needed to do or wanted to do, probably, or definitely they didn't need to do it. And that is to look really closely at counterpoint, and as a cellist or as a violinist, you already know that Bach plays a very critical role in your upbringing as a musician. And it always seemed to me, once I found out about counterpoint, what it was, and that Bach's music is contrapuntal. I mean, everything he wrote was contrapuntal, with few exceptions. Why was it that the extent of the teacher's discussion or teaching on counterpoint was listen to the voices? Can you find, listen for the bass voice, listen for the melodic voice, the inner voices, and so on. And it was, I'd never, that I can recall, heard mention, of course, if I didn't know about it, I would be hard pressed to remember that they mentioned it. But it seems like it should be front and center, like for dozens of lessons to understand counterpoint. And so for a couple of years, I've been thinking, man, Bach doesn't resonate with me in the way that it could. Don't get me wrong, I love Bach. I think Bach is definitely at the pinnacle of musical writing. I'm not saying that I'm putting him down at all, because I think his music is beautiful, and he deserves a high spot that he does have. But what I'm saying is, I can't appreciate Bach in an intimate and deep way because I don't understand counterpoint. And when I discovered this section on counterpoint in a cello method, that means that everything that Quarenghi wrote in this method is oriented to cello playing. They're all cello duets in this section of counterpoint. The 5 species, animation, canon, and the fugue, they're all cello duets, 2 voices. And that just, it left me speechless in some regard. Anyway, what I want to do now is just play a few examples of counterpoint, fugue, coming from an old version of Groves, 120, 130 years ago. That's the version I'm looking at here. And it's really nice because this is basically like a textbook right here. You could learn as much as you really need to know to understand and appreciate Bach on a deeper level, like not just subcutaneous level, but like like fleshy kind of level, way down in there, maybe even like blood type of level, if you want to put it that way. So here are some examples. The just very simple subject answer. We're dealing with tonic dominant, which means we're using, if we're in C major, we start on C. If we're in the answer part, then we start on G, because that's the dominant. So we've got this in that order, C, G. Here's the subject. Here's the answer, starting on G. I mean, that's useful already, because then you know what to look for. Here's another example. Here comes the answer. That was the subject. Here comes the answer. I mean, tonic, right? And the answer, dominant. Wonderful. We can understand that very simply when we know what to look for. And now I think that's really interesting. So if we go back to Quarenghi's fugue, subject, we're in G minor, by the way. Right? G and then D for the dominant, back to G minor. There's G, outlining G minor. Now, when he comes to the answer, it is very clearly in the dominant. All right, so, but in this case, he uses, I guess, I haven't studied it this far to really know how to term this. Probably you could term it as a borrowed chord, because he's playing exactly like this. He's doing a minor for the beginning for the subject, and then minor again, but in the dominant. So dominant obviously has to be major, right? You cannot have a minor mode dominant. For the rules of the game, it doesn't work. So I guess it's borrowed. Anyway, as far as theory is concerned, that's probably what I would guess. Now let's use some famous examples. Like, for example, Handel wrote the Messiah. There's the Hallelujah chorus is a famous example in there. Oh, sorry, it's a little slow. did that when I live streamed earlier. I did that too. There we go. And then the answer. So the subject, I always forget to say subject first. Here's a subject in D major. And the answer in A major. Let me try that again. I'm transposing here, so forgive me. I'm transposing down a whole octave. Okay, now to go a little bit deeper, let's look at Bach's the Kunst der Fuge, or the Art of the Fugue. And in succession, we have number 5, number 6, and number 7. And by deeper, I mean there are various ways that you can treat the answer. In this case, we've got inversion in all of the examples of this Art of the Fugue. And in some cases, we have regular, it just follows exactly in terms of duration and rhythm, and then later diminution and augmentation. Very interesting stuff. Here comes the subject. We're in D minor, which means the answer seems like we would expect it to be what? Or at least A major, A minor rather. So listen, this is quite interesting. Oh, sorry. Let me count that. 3, 4. Right? There's the subject of the Art of the Fugue, and here comes the answer. Which is interesting because it seems like we're in D minor still as its answer. But have you noticed that he went up instead of down? Here's the subject. Right? So he starts in the subject, he starts on an A and jumps down to D, but in the answer, he starts on D and jumps up to the A, which is interesting. I don't know how that works. And like I said, I haven't studied deeply enough in the theoretical side of things to really understand it, but there you have it. Here comes, that was number 5, here comes number 6, and it's labeled in groves, answer by inversion and diminution. Here's the subject. Okay, now what's interesting to me, that the subject is no longer going down, it's going up. The subject apparently is borrowed from the answer of the previous number. Remember, the original, well, at least the subject from number 5 does this. And then the answer of number 5 does this. Now here's the subject in number 6, which is exactly the same notes, same rhythm, everything from the answer of number 5. What's interesting is that the answer of number 6 does this. It's inversion and diminution. So it's truncated. It's like in half. It's twice as fast. Here comes number 7. The subject, again, is apparently borrowing the answer by inversion from number 5. But it's shorter. It's diminished. The answer, by contrast, is called in groves by inversion, and it's augmentation. So it's lengthened, the duration is lengthened. But interestingly enough, the lengthened augmentation is actually the same rhythm of the subject from number 5. Curious, methinks. Why? I don't know, but that's for another day. I just want to point these things out. Here is coming back to the fugue. I'm gonna spend probably 4 more minutes or 5 more minutes. I'm gonna go through what Quarenghi labeled. He labeled some parts in here, but I'm going to keep to the subject parts, like what are clearly labeled as subject. So episodes, I'm not going to do that right now. I just want to stay to the subject matter, as it were. So he's labeled subject, answer, and then later on he labeled the subject in the way of imitation, and then we have to skip 2 pages before he labels anything else, and then he labels organ point or pedal point. Very interesting. Dominant, remember, we're in G minor, so the dominant must be D. So we got a long pedal point on D. And then coming toward the end, the last quarter of the piece, we've got 3 strettos. Very cool. And this is very common in fugue, where you bring the parts closer together. So when you have the subject and the answer, the subject plays, but the answer kind of jumps in before the subject has a chance to say everything. Well, not kind of, it does. And there's an interesting effect. He has 3 strettos, remember, and each time the stretto comes in, it's a bit different. And let's see if you can figure out. Here is the subject, and here is the answer. And that D downbeat is exactly where the answer comes in. And then an episode, or he labels it divertimento. I don't quite understand if episode and divertimento are interchangeable, but anyway. Quite nice. He has a counter subject. So when the answer comes in, we've got a counter subject going. I'm going to try and pluck it just so you can get an idea. I didn't practice it. That's my mistake. I should have practiced this. Maybe. Anyway, not easy to do on a. I mean, the conception of this instrument is a one-note instrument, melodic, if you will, instrument. And of course, at the beginning, it was more of a bass type fulfillment instrument. So here we come to the long pedal. It's on D, remember? We're in G minor. So it's typical to have that pedal point on D, which is kind of forcing us to it's forcing the music to have this tension. It's really stretching us. That's kind of like pulling on a rubber band or a bow and arrow, and you keep on pulling that thing, and even if you can't physically move it back anymore, you still keep pulling to try. So that's kind of what I feel like this is. That's where the first stretto starts, right there. The same voice. First stretto starts in the voice number 1, cello 1. Now we do get a little bit of the subject 1 measure after the pedal comes in. So this is cello 1. Now cello 2 has a little bit of the subject. That's definitely subject in G minor. But here, he kind of goes freely after that, and that is apparently common too. Now the stretto. Watch this. The stretto. Okay, so he kind of deviates after just 4 measures. But when does the answer come in? A measure and a half. So he cut the answer is like, let me get in there. I need to say something. Answer. But now, check this out. The subject of the second stretto starts in cello 2. So this answer continues on and just morphs into subject matter. But instead of waiting a measure and a half, as per what stretto means, which means bringing together, tightening the interaction of voices, you only wait a measure to bring in the answer, which is in cello 1. So we've got and so on and so forth. Now we've got some measures of play back and forth. You're holding out a long note in one and playing some shorter notes in the other voice, and then taking turns doing that sort of rhythmic back and forth. Here's the third stretto, and now it's the shortest entrance, only half a measure from when the subject answers. Here's the subject, and here's the answer. It's literally a half a measure, so he can't play even one measure of subject. It goes like this if I pluck it. Like this. Now, he doesn't label as a coda, but I guess this is a coda or codetta or something. And it's clearly ending because he does a largo. I mean, it's like very organ-like. You've got these big chords of C minor and more C minor. It's a big plagal cadence. Lovely stuff. Yeah, awesome. It's like you're in church. I mean, it's quite reverential in a way. Anyway, I hope you like it, and please join me. I'll be doing the podcast, my final installment on Counterpoint for the time being anyway. And I'm looking forward to putting it together and recording this fairly lengthy fugue. It's 194 measures total. So he took his time. He really dealt with it a lot. Thanks for joining me. I hope you have a lovely time. Thanks a lot. And remember to play more forgotten cello music.